Historians still argue, if Mickey Mantle had stayed healthy, would he have been the greatest who ever played? But that's not really the question. The real question is, why did the most talented man in the room spend his whole life destroying himself? I've been sitting with Mickey Mantle's story for a long time, longer than most of the others I've covered in this series, because there's something about Mantle that hits differently than Ruth or DiMaggio or Cobb. With Ruth, you have the abandoned kid who channeled his hunger into greatness. With DiMaggio, you have the private man behind the perfect exterior. With Cobb, you have the rage that produced records and ruins in equal measure. With Mantle, you have something that feels more familiar, more modern, more painful in a specific way. The story of a man who was given more natural talent than almost anyone who ever played the game, who knew it, who squandered significant portions of it deliberately, and who spent the last years of his life trying to reckon with what that meant. Mickey Charles Mantle was born on October 20th, 1931, in Spavinaw, Oklahoma, the son of Elvin Mutt Mantle, a lead and zinc miner who worked the mines of Commerce, Oklahoma, and who had one consuming dream that had nothing to do with mining. Mutt Mantle wanted his son to be a professional baseball player, not in the casual way that fathers sometimes project athletic ambitions onto their kids, in a structured, deliberate, years-long project kind of way. Mutt had been a decent amateur player himself, good enough to understand what real talent looked like, and to recognize very early that his son had something that went beyond what he'd seen before. He started teaching Mickey to switch hit, to bat from both sides of the plate, before the boy was in school. He threw batting practice to him constantly. He built the kid's baseball education the way another father might build a piece of furniture, carefully over time, with a clear picture of what the finished thing was supposed to look like. But Mutt Mantle gave his son something else, alongside the baseball education, and this is the part of the story that casts a shadow over everything that follows. The Mantle men died young. Mutt's father had died young. Mutt's brothers had died young. The family carried a history of Hodgkin's disease, a cancer of the lymphatic system that had moved through the male line with what felt to Mutt like inevitability. Mutt told Mickey this. He told him directly, in the way that people sometimes tell hard truths to children when they believe the truth is more useful than protection from it. You are probably not going to live to be old. The men in this family don't. So whatever you're going to do it now. Do it hard. Do it while you have the time. Mickey Mantle absorbed that message at an age when most kids are still figuring out multiplication tables, and he never fully let go of it. Not when he was playing, not when he was drinking, not when he was lying in a hospital bed at 63 years old, having destroyed his liver with 4 decades of alcohol. He had been living like a man, on borrowed time since he was a child, because his father had told him that was exactly what he was. He was signed by the Yankees as a 17-year-old in 1949. The scouts who saw him were not cautious in their assessments. The word that came back consistently was extraordinary. Not good, not promising, extraordinary. He could run, timed at 3.1 seconds from home to first base from the right side, which was and remains among the fastest anyone has ever recorded. He had power from both sides of the plate that was, in the estimation of people who had spent their careers evaluating hitters, genuinely unlike anything they had seen in a player that age. And he had an arm in the outfield that drew the same response. Casey Stengel, the Yankees manager, who had seen everything in 50 years of professional baseball, watched Mantle in his first spring training in 1951 and reportedly said that the kid was going to be the greatest player he had ever seen. Stengel was not a man given to easy superlatives. Mantle made his major league debut on April 17, 1951, at 19 years old. DiMaggio was still on the team. It was DiMaggio's final season, and the two of them played together briefly in the Yankees' outfield. The legend at the end of his career, and the heir apparent at the very beginning of his. DiMaggio reportedly watched Mantle in batting practice and said very little, which from DiMaggio was not unusual, but the watching was noted by people who were there. Then in October 1951, in Game 2 of the World Series, Mantle caught his spikes on a drainage cover in the outfield at Yankee Stadium, chasing a fly ball. His right knee collapsed underneath him, and he went down hard. He was taken off the field on a stretcher. His father, Mutt, who had come to New York to watch his son play in the World Series, helped carry him. And at the hospital, while Mickey was being examined, Mutt sat down and couldn't get back up. He was admitted to the same hospital. He had been sick for a while and hadn't told anyone. He died of Hodgkin's disease the following May. He was 39 years old. Mickey Mantle was 20 years old. His father had been right about everything: the baseball, the talent, and the dying young. All of it was true. I grew up in the Bronx, going to games at the old Yankee Stadium with my dad and my uncle. And my uncle used to talk about watching Mantle play in the late 50s when he was a kid. And the thing he always came back to wasn't any specific home run or any specific game. It was the way Mantle ran. Even with the bad knee, even with the legs wrapped in bandages, which they were for most of his career, both knees heavily taped before every game, because the joints were so damaged that he needed the support just to take the field. My uncle said you could see it. The way he was running through something that would have stopped most people completely, and that watching it was equal parts thrilling and painful, because you always had the sense that you were watching something being used up in front of you. The statistics Mantle produced, despite the injuries, are genuinely staggering. He won the Triple Crown in 1956, leading the league in batting average, home runs, and RBIs simultaneously, something that has happened only a handful of times in the history of the sport. He hit .353 that year, with 52 home runs and 130 RBIs. He won 3 MVP awards. He hit 536 career home runs, despite missing significant portions of multiple seasons to injury and surgery. He was a 7-time world champion. He made 20 All-Star teams, and he did all of this on legs that were, by his own description, and the description of team doctors, held together with tape and cortisone injections, and the particular stubbornness of a man who had been told since childhood that his time was limited, so he was going to use every minute of it on the field, regardless of what his body was telling him. But here's the other side of Mickey Mantle that the trophy case doesn't show. The drinking started early, and it never stopped. By his own account, by the accounts of teammates, by the accounts of people who knew him socially, Mantle was a heavy drinker from his early 20s onward, not occasionally heavy, consistently structurally daily heavy. He and his teammate, Whitey Ford and Billy Martin, the three of them were inseparable for years, were famous throughout baseball for their nightlife, their capacity for alcohol, their ability to show up the next day and play at an elite level, despite what the night before had involved. There was a mythology around it, the way there had been a mythology around Ruth's excesses, and in the short term, it was treated as part of the legend rather than a warning sign. But unlike Ruth, whose excesses seemed almost metabolically irrelevant to his performance, Mantle's drinking was eating him from the inside in ways that became increasingly visible as his career went on. The injuries healed more slowly. The reflexes that had been supernatural started to slow in ways they shouldn't have at his age. He retired after the 1968 season at 36, which is not old for a position player, saying that he could no longer hit the way he needed to hit to justify taking a roster spot. What he didn't say publicly, but said later, was that his body had been destroyed, not just by the injuries, but by what he had done to it off the field for 15 years. After retirement, the drinking got worse rather than better. Without the structure of the season, without the daily purpose of showing up and playing, Mantle found himself adrift in a way that the alcohol made temporarily manageable and permanently worse. His marriage to Merlin Johnson. They had married in 1951, 4 sons together, survived the career but didn't really survive what came after. The family was present but fractured. His sons struggled with addiction themselves, in patterns that looked uncomfortably like watching their father. His oldest son, Billy, died of Hodgkin's disease in 1994 at 36. The same disease that had killed Mutt Mantle. The same age. When Billy died, Mickey Mantle finally checked himself into the Betty Ford Center for Alcohol Treatment. He was 62 years old. He had been drinking heavily for 40 years. What happened after Betty Ford is one of the most remarkable and heartbreaking final chapters in the history of American sport. Mantle got sober. And getting sober meant, for the first time in decades, actually feeling the full weight of what his life had been. What he had done to his body, to his family, to the talent he had been given and partially squandered. He gave an interview in 1994 that stopped people cold. He said, directly and without the deflection that had characterized most of his public appearances for years, "Don't be like me." He said, if he had taken care of himself the way he should have, God only knew what the numbers might have looked like. He said he had wasted a lot of what he had been given, and he knew it, and he was sorry for it. It was the most honest thing he had ever said in public, and it was also, in its clarity and its timing, almost unbearably late. He was diagnosed with liver cancer in 1995. The liver had been destroyed by decades of alcohol. He received a liver transplant in June 1995. He died on August 13, 1995. He was 63 years old. His father had died at 39. Mantle had outlived him by 24 years, which was more than the Mantle men were supposed to get, and he had spent a significant portion of those extra years in a way that he himself, in the end, could not defend. Bob Costas delivered the eulogy. He said something that I think is the most accurate single sentence ever written about Mickey Mantle. He was our symbol of baseball at a time when the game meant something to this country that perhaps it no longer does, And he was the most compelling combination of talent and human frailty the sport has ever seen. Talent and human frailty. Not talent despite human frailty. The combination of the two. Because that's what Mantle actually was, not the sanitized legend of the switch, hitting slugger with the perfect swing, but a man whose greatness and whose self-destruction came from the same place. The boy whose father told him he was going to die young, who believed it completely, who played and drank, and lived with the urgency of someone who had been told the clock was already running out. He was wrong about how much time he had, but by the time he found that out, the habits of a lifetime were not the kind of thing you simply put down. He was the most talented player most people who saw him play had ever seen. He knew it. He said so, without arrogance, just as a statement of fact in those final, honest interviews. And he also said that knowing it hadn't been enough to make him take care of it the way it deserved. That's the Mickey Mantle story. Not the 536 home runs, not the Triple Crown. The talent and the frailty, inseparable, right up to the end. Hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me who you want me to go into next. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to hype it up and subscribe.